Hey guys, welcome back to User Experience Points. Hey, look at that, we made it to 30 episodes. That is super cool. I seriously can't thank you guys enough. It has been so awesome talking about UX design in games with all of you, and I just can't wait to make 30 more of these. Well, we hit another multiple of 10, so it's time for another roundup. If you haven't heard me explain this before, a roundup episode is where I get the chance to look back on some of the games that I covered and maybe talk about some stuff that I cut for time, or if I want to look at a game that didn't have enough interesting points to fill an entire episode. So let's talk about something that I cut from the Dark Souls episode. The game's heads-up display does a great job of dividing its information into groups that make sense together. On the top left is everything that indicates the status of your character, like your health and stamina. On the bottom right, it's just how many souls you have, which is very important to know. And finally, on the bottom left, we have my favorite part, the item and weapon selection. It's a very useful part of the interface because it allows you to scroll between 4 different types of items using only the D-pad. If the intuitive visual design didn't already give it away for you, you press the corresponding direction on the D-pad to scroll through each type of item. The inability to go back and forth in each of these sections might seem like a possible frustration, but since each of these sections limits the amount of slots it has, you're never scrolling through too many at any given time. Next, let's talk about the heads-up display in Bloodborne. From Software also designed Bloodborne, and you can definitely see how this game's heads-up display is sort of a natural progression from Dark Souls, though there is one hiccup that is left over. For the most part it's great. It's actually very nicely streamlined because now there's only 2 corners of the screen that you're looking at instead of 3. This comes from the fact that healing items are now on their own button. You only scroll through one selection of items, and your selected weapon is simply shown on your character. There's no need to show it in the interface. Scrolling through items is the one hiccup that's left over from Dark Souls because you can only scroll through them in one direction. Now this isn't a huge deal because only so many items can be equipped to that menu at any given time. But since there's no longer a section of items that can be scrolled through by pressing up on the D-pad, it seems like you should be able to go back and forth through this list. So many times I've accidentally pressed up on the D-pad, which, in the game right now, causes you to exchange some of your health for bullets, which is not the type of thing you want to do by accident. It's not a huge deal, but it's a perfect example of how reusing old patterns isn't always the best course of action in UX design. Next, let's hop over to Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, and if you're seeing screenshots right now, I do apologize, you can blame Konami for that. I didn't get a chance to talk about the menu that pops up when you sneak up on a guard and manage to get a hold of him. At this point, you have 3 options available to you, and each one requires a different type of interaction along with a different button. To interrogate the guard or command him to call over his friends, you have to hold down the L1 button, which functions basically as a way to drill down in the menu and then select 2 more options. To non-lethally deal with the guard, you can get him into a chokehold until he passes out by mashing the R2 button. Or if you're not feeling particularly compassionate, you can just press triangle to stab him. What's neat about this menu is the way the icons are animated to show what type of gesture you need to make when you're pressing them. The interrogation option in particular is also very well designed because it's super easy to back out of by just letting go of the L1 button. And when you are choosing your interrogation options, you still use the right stick to select between the 2. This eliminates awkwardness of trying to manipulate the left joystick while you're already holding down the button, and continues the theme of delegating all of the other available actions to the right side of the controller. It's a very well designed menu overall that perfectly explains all of the actions available to you in a very stressful situation. All stealth games that give you multiple options for dealing with your opposition could learn from this menu. Okay, here's a quick one. The radial menu for switching weapons in Shadow Warrior is awesome because it makes perfect use of the middle of the radial menu. Radial menus generally involve holding down a button, then moving the analog stick to make a selection. Having an option in the middle is something that seems to be overlooked in a lot of games that use radial menus. But it makes perfect sense to make the most likely used item in this menu the middle, that way you can select it quickly without moving the joystick at all, you just hold down the button. In Shadow Warrior, your sword is in the center of the radial menu, effectively making the button that you hold down to activate the radial menu a shortcut to drawing your sword. Add that to the pile of things that are genius about Shadow Warrior. And finally, let's leave off with the Final Fantasy XV demo. I was going to do an episode on this game, but there just isn't enough in it to cover a full episode. Thankfully, I do have time to talk about one really frustrating part of the UI. Whenever you camp in the game, your party eats a meal that gives them buffs for the next day. For For some reason, in the UI, these buffs repeatedly flash over and over again next to each character's life meter. And it never ever stops. You just go about the game and you constantly see these two icons switching between each other. It's incredibly distracting. Since these buffs are applied to the whole party, it would make perfect sense to give the icons their own space that represents how they affect the entire party instead of having each member's icons blinking over and over again. Even if it's possible in the final game for characters to individually receive different buffs, there's definitely a better way to display them than just toggling between two icons over and over again. And that's all I've got for you guys this week. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, you should definitely subscribe because I upload a new episode of UXP every Friday. And again, I just can't thank you guys enough for all the awesome feedback I've been getting on this series. I'm so happy that I made it to 30 episodes, and I really hope I can make 30 more. See you all next week.